We welcome you to another edition of Being Well Informed. My name is Claudia Barber, and I am your host of this podcast that airs regularly on all major platforms. We are excited today to have as our special guest for the Maryland Black Legislative Caucus Delegate Jennifer White. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're excited again to see you because this forum that we have for today's program really has to do with the work of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus. So tell us about yourself and your connection with the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus.
Absolutely. So, greetings, everyone. I'm Delegate Jennifer White Holland. I have the pleasure of representing the 10th Legislative District in Baltimore County.
Mhm.
And I'm newly elected, so I'm still a freshman delegate as I was elected in 2022 and
Wow.
went on to my first legislative session in 2023. And so during that first session, I had the opportunity to not only become a member of the Legislative Black Caucus, but to also serve on the Legislative Review Committee. And
Mhm.
that is a really important committee because we have an opportunity to receive bills from our own members, but also members from the General Assembly, both in the House and the Senate. So we have an opportunity to determine whether or not if the Black Caucus is poised to support legislation that comes before us. And the way
Mhm.
in which that we support bills is through letters, by working and engaging with leadership and demonstrating our support in those particular ways, and making sure that our members are aware of some of the bills that we are supporting as a caucus beyond those bills that are our legislative priorities. And so I've had the privilege of being a member of the largest legislative Black caucus in the country. Uh,
Wow.
and not only serving on that committee my first year, but this year in particular, I was very pleased to be one of the bill sponsors for one of our priority bills.
Okay. So now the Legislative Black Caucus, because the whole focus of our podcast today is the 2024 General Assembly and the legislation that passed and the impact that the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus has had on legislation for 2024. How large is the caucus in size?
Absolutely. So we are 66 members strong,
Wow.
including members in the
That's
House of Delegates and in the Senate.
large. That's thrilling news. I don't think it was always that way. That's
No,
thrilling.
no. And we started back in 1970. And so we have, more than 50 years of history. And so it is very exciting to be a part of this historic body that, if anything, such a very impactful and influential caucus, and is a significant voting bloc within
Mhm.
our legislature.
So now this first legislative session, no, you said you were in the 2023 session. Is that
Yes, that
correct?
was my first
Oh,
legislative session.
that was your first. So
Mhm.
in this 2024 legislative session, what makes the mission of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus unique from other caucuses?
So I would say it is truly how we live and how we walk in it, right? Like
Mhm.
our mission is truly about improving the quality of life for Black Marylanders, and we take on various legislative and administrative actions towards improving what I would call the social determinants of health as a public health person, right? As a public health professional, it's those social
Mhm.
determinants. It's housing, it's transportation, it's environment, it's health. It's all the things that help to inform how we live, work, play, and pray. And so we
So,
take on those bills to really
mhm.
make life better for Black Marylanders.
So what in this legislative session do you believe got accomplished of significance? Because I mean, there's over 3,000 bills. I'm sure
Right.
that's probably introduced thousands of bills, and they all don't make it on the last day of the assembly. They don't make it over the threshold.
Right.
So
Right.
give
You're
us
right.
the details.
That's right. So we are fortunate to have not only a legislative Black caucus that is the largest and is a really influential force in the legislature, but we elevate and work on bills that relate to Black wealth, that relate to education, that relate to health and the environment, criminal justice reform and public safety, along with minority businesses
Mhm.
and health building. And so I was very excited in speaking about one of my bills that was actually signed into law today. Today,
Oh,
one of
great.
one of the final bill signing ceremonies, and this is where a number of legislators, advocates, stakeholders come to Annapolis, and the governor, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, and the clerk's office, and all those involved have a bill signing ceremony. And so I'll elevate one of our priority bills as a caucus was the Maryland Maternal Health Act.
Okay.
I was pleased to work alongside our chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, Chair Janelle Wilkins, on this bill. And given our passion related to Black maternal health, as you know, Black women um, are experiencing a significant crisis here, where they are 3 to 4 times more likely to die as a result of pregnancy-related deaths. And many of these deaths, and close to 80% of these deaths, are preventable. And
Mm,
so we have to do much more in order to make sure that we are saving saving lives and making sure that Black women, especially in clinical settings, are heard and respected, and that their experience within the birthing facility is one that is joyous and not one that is leaving them experiencing trauma and harm. And so
mm,
this bill better streamlines and updates how we provide the necessary referrals to our local health departments, making sure that moms are leaving the hospital and birthing people are able to leave the hospitals with the information they need to have a successful postpartum period, to ensure that our hospitals, our birthing hospitals, that there is a report card. And so making sure that every Marylander can access this report card and outline and see the various maternal and infant health outcomes of that specific facility, as
mm,
well as making sure that our hospitals participate in the severe maternal morbidity review that operates in our state. And so it was multifaceted. We brought together a diverse range of stakeholders, but that is an example of how the Black Caucus is operating and is acting. Right? Is that we not only say that we're the largest, but we are using our influence, our expertise, and bringing all the necessary voices to the table to make life better and to really make transformational policy.
Well, I am aware that you have a very diverse group of legislative leaders in the Legislative Black Caucus, from physicians to lawyers to probably educators and so forth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so it's really great to be in such an amazing, be a part of such an amazing group of individuals that are bringing their, not only their lived experience, but also their own, experience through their professional careers.
So, the legislative progress that was made in 2024, what other
Mhm.
examples do you have?
Absolutely. And so I would say, I'm going to stick to my committee if you don't mind.
That's
But I
okay.
would say, what I have observed, and this is really more for reflection for me as it
Mhm,
relates to how we have strengthened systems and the
mhm,
ongoing work that we're doing to really strengthen systems of care. So thinking about our workforce, thinking about service delivery and the quality that is delivered to our residents, and also thinking about access to care. And that's one of the other bills that I would like to elevate that was also signed into law today was the Access to Care Act. And this
Okay.
bill was also supported uh, by by the Legislative Black Caucus, as we stood alongside the Latino caucus as well. But this
Mhm.
bill would simply allow individuals, regardless of their immigration status, to access healthcare using the marketplace. And so we have our Maryland Health Exchange, and so this would allow us to ensure that those regardless of their immigration status, to buy their own health insurance, buy it with
Okay,
their
that's
own,
important.
which is
Mhm.
critically important. And so it provides these families with undocumented families or those with mixed status to receive the care that they need. Because we know that in Maryland, and this is another bill that we looked at as it relates to our wait time commission that was passed and
Mhm.
successful,
Mhm.
we have the worst wait times in the state, the worst.
Mm.
We are last
Okay.
on the
Okay.
list. And so when we think about ensuring that people have access to primary care, preventative care, it will ease the issues in the ER, because that's where people are going who do not have health insurance. They're going to the
Mhm.
ER, right? And so
Well,
that's
I
some of the
can I
progress
can
we
sort
made.
I can sort of slightly speak to the emergency room wait time issue because I actually had to go to the ER within the last year,
Wow.
and but my experience somehow was a little bit different, and it may have been the time that I arrived,
Mhm.
but my wait time and my service time was less than 2 hours.
Oh,
Now, this
that's
was
good
at
for
Howard
you.
County
Okay.
General Hospital, and
Okay.
I'm not trying to get a flood of people to come there, but
Oh, they're already there. Trust me.
you know, but
They're
I,
there.
I I have to applaud them
Yeah.
for their service time.
Hmm.
And the one time I had an attack and I had to get there. So one was chest pains, and I would they immediately put me through. Got my X-ray, got my blood work, everything. It was fast, fast, fast. And
Yeah.
within 2 hours, they looked at all the information and made a healthcare decision about me. But one time I arrived at maybe 2 a.m. in the morning, and there was not a lot of activity. So the wait time was very, very short. But I was reminding people in my prayer group, listen, if you go to the hospital, y'all check out the wait times because you don't want to be there, 10 hours. You don't want to be there
Mhm.
24 hours before you get waited on and you're
Right.
sick. That's
Right.
awful.
Right.
But I know that's not the case for every single hospital in Maryland.
Right.
But I do understand that that's been a challenge lately.
It has. It has. And that's why, we are focused on improving those systems of care, right? So that's an example. I would also elevate as another Maryland Legislative Black Caucus priority that was successful this year was HB 1293. This is the
Mhm.
Maryland Department of Health public education campaign on prostate, lung, and breast cancer prevention.
Wow.
So this will provide, and it creates a $750,000 statewide public education campaign to educate and engage our communities about prostate, lung, and breast cancer, because we know that there are disparities in our communities, especially when it comes to these cancers. There's late diagnosis, which results in more aggressive cancers. And so
Mm.
it's really important that we get and stay on top of this and making sure that we know when to go to the doctors. We know
Mhm.
to get screened, know to ask the questions, what questions to ask, and just making sure that we are reaching, as in the church we say, lottie dottie and everybody, to make sure that people are getting the care that they need to prevent lung, breast, and prostate cancer.
So do you think that um, there's full access to breast cancer or mammograms rather,
Mhm.
or prostate cancer detection in the health arena in Maryland?
So I know that we still have more work to do in that area, and I do recall uh, there was a bill actually this year that provided additional supplemental testing when it comes to breast
Okay.
cancer, because
Mhm.
we know that even beyond a mammogram, especially for Black women, additional testing may be needed, and it may be helpful to take that extra step to ensure that we have the right diagnosis, that we're not just walking
Right.
out the door thinking that everything is okay. There might be a better need for that. And so I will be sure to look that up there. But you're right. It provides actually, I found it here. It was HB 1259,
Hmm.
sponsored by Delegate Alston, called Health Insurance Breast and Lung Cancer Screening Coverage Requirements. And so it's a bill that extended coverage for follow up diagnostic tests after an initial screening for breast cancer and lung cancer, to ensure that there's additional testing. Right.
Oh,
So that was
beautiful,
a bill
beautiful.
that we heard and was successful this year.
Very good, very good. Now you mentioned the healthcare arena,
Mhm.
but you also mentioned early on the fact that you covered topics such as, I gather, the blueprint
Yeah.
legislation,
Mhm.
and you also covered topics like uh, the um, the Key Bridge
Yeah.
disaster
Yeah.
funding. And you also covered legislation pertaining to transportation projects. Do you recall anything significant in those arenas?
Absolutely. So I will say this about the blueprint. And again, I am not a native Marylander. So I'm originally from Michigan, and I really, I am not just fascinated, but I am uh, really impressed with how our state prioritizes education.
Oh,
Uh,
good,
and
good.
so when it comes to all good things,
That's good.
and
That's great.
I've been in Maryland since 2010, and I've always known that this is where I wanted to be, and
Okay.
so I am. It's really it's really a wonderful place to be. But as it relates to the blueprint and funding for the blueprint, I'm very pleased to share that when it came to our budget that we passed and actually was signed into law today, that the blueprint is now fully funded through fiscal year 2027, and it was through
Very impressive.
increase of the tobacco tax. Now, people
Okay.
can say what it is that they want about that. As a public health person, I am, that is we see how that can be a deterrent to reduce
Hmm.
consumption of tobacco products, right? And
Right.
so assigning that tobacco tax revenue really to the blueprint fund. And so it allows us to ensure that we're upholding our commitments to educators, to our educational support professionals, and and most importantly to our students and their families.
Okay.
And so when it comes to pre-K for 3-year-olds and 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, that is included in that, to make sure that we're improving our reading proficiency, and recruiting and retaining more highly culturally competent and qualified educators, and ensuring that our community schools are supported as well. So we did great work, excellent work, to ensure that our blueprint was funded. And I know in Baltimore County, we have been able to bring back more than $1 billion to our school system.
Marvelous, marvelous. So, will that lead to more school buildings, new school buildings, or will it also lead to accountability projects in the area of education? I know the blueprint is a pretty
Mhm.
comprehensive piece of legislation.
Yeah. So, and again, each school system, when it comes to new school construction and the like, they have the ability to determine those particular aspects of things. But you're right. When it comes to accountability, the Accountability Implementation Board, that is a part of the blueprint as well. Right. And
Hmm.
so when we talk about the blueprint, we're talking about that comprehensive plan that has not only those core components outlined in it, but also it has the necessary accountability mechanisms embedded in it to ensure that we are seeing not only improvements within the school setting and space, but also ensuring that our kids have access to the best resources and to the best spaces for them to learn. Uh,
Juvenile justice reform,
yeah.
that's been a hot topic.
Yes.
Why?
So, and I'll say this because I've had other conversations in the community about this a lot, and it was Speaker Adrian Jones, who is my teammate and also serves in District 10, along with the chair of the judiciary, so Chair Luke Clippinger from Baltimore City. They worked together on HB 814, which was also signed into law today. And as I mentioned before, as it relates to progress, right? You asked about, so what type of progress did the legislature make?
Hmm.
And again, as someone who is a public health professional, I see and think about again those systems, right? And how we have been working to really strengthen those systems. There was great work done as it relates to juvenile justice reform from previous sessions. Uh,
Okay.
but what we have encountered and what I believe our community, law enforcement, those that provide wraparound services and the like, we know that there's the missing middle, right? And even in a mental and behavioral health space, we know that there's more demand than supply when it comes to
Okay.
providers and the like. But when it comes to juvenile justice, and even in this instance, we noticed that we needed to better strengthen how our kids were getting the services that they needed. How can we better improve diversion programs and ensuring that they can be connected to those particular programs? And so I think that there were revisions made just due to some of the ongoing conversations that we have
Okay.
around what's working, what's not working. And I think
Hmm.
that is also about progress, right? Like I think we often think that uh, when policies are passed, that immediately that it's supposed to cure everything.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
quite frankly, it takes time. And we also have to recognize that even along the way, we may have to make tweaks and we may have
Mm.
to make small changes as we move forward when we see and realize what things look like in community. And so, that is just from what I have witnessed and in the conversation when it comes to juvenile justice and some of the changes. It was a very big and heavy bill.
It
Uh,
was.
so
And
yes.
but it added age-wise, the the scope of juvenile um, liability
Hmm.
to 10-year-olds, or they extended that age,
Hmm.
and many public defenders, uh, challenged that specific provision and that aspect of the bill.
Yeah.
So that's just one area. And we don't have all day, but then there's also the Police Accountability Board
Hmm.
legislation. Were there any tweaks? Were there any amendments? Is this something still on the agenda? How is this really working? the repeal
So,
of the Law Enforcement Bill, Officers Bill of Rights, and now the Police Accountability Boards.
and I believe there was work done on that in 2022, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm. Okay.
So I know that our various counties have been establishing and um, uh, building their police accountability boards and the like. So I can't say that I am, uh, an expert in that particular area, right? But like you said, I think, it takes time for things to implement and for us to see, well, what are the outcomes from these existing processes, especially when
Mhm.
it comes to these police accountability boards, given that they are across different jurisdictions. What are some of the further changes that need to be made? So I know that the Juvenile Justice Reform Bill was the major piece of legislation to come out of that particular space. But as it relates to the police accountability boards, I would have to follow up with you on that more specifically
Okay.
about how that is working and how that is being actualized in our communities. And again, I think it's been a mixed bag, because
Mhm.
there were even comments about, well, who gets to sit on this particular board, and the
Mhm.
who and the how and when, right?
Well, in the community, there
Mhm.
was a concern of having police members
Police,
on
yeah,
the Police Accountability Board, like retired police
retired
officers.
police officers, yes.
So that was a concern. Then there was the passage of Antoine's Law that gave better access to police misconduct records. And so through Maryland Public Information Act requests, then there's the topic of transportation
Mm,
and the red line,
yes.
and the cancellation of the red line. Is it on? Is it off? I mean, do we know at this particular point where the legislature is going on that?
Right. So I will say, even going back to the blueprint conversation when we're talking about funding, we were able to include $330 million in revenue to support our transportation system.
Okay.
Um, and so that translates to ensuring that our localities have the necessary funding, uh, to support local projects, right? Looking at other transit systems and the like, MTA or Maryland Transportation Administration, state highways and the like. And also allowed, the funding also allows for continued planning for the red line. And so to date, there have already been some town halls. I know, especially in Baltimore County, there have already been some community meetings and feedback sessions related to the red line. I know advocates, and including myself, we want to see rail, that it
Mhm.
shouldn't just translate to an expansion of bus lines and bus service lines, right? Like, you know,
Yes, and I realize there's a surging population of people that are concerned about transportation, and they're saying, "Bring the red line back."
yeah,
It was canceled by the former governor,
right.
and basically it was not even brought here, and there was a record of decision already made to bring it here.
Mhm.
So however, the conversation in getting that particular the real red line through. Is that something that perhaps the Legislative Black Caucus may address at some point?
So, I will say this, and when it comes to the Legislative Black Caucus and how we um, elevate different priorities and the like, it comes from our body,
Mhm.
right? And so we are certainly a body that certainly supports equitable transportation and the like. And so we've and been on record in doing so. And so I think, as it relates to that in particular, I think that is to be determined, right? And
Mhm.
so we utilize the summer time to not only go back to our districts to share about all the work that we've done, but also to receive input and feedback. And it's also an opportunity for us to come together as a caucus to flush out what are our priorities and what are the things that we need to to elevate and bring to the attention of the governor and the administration to ensure that, for example, like the red line can continue. I will say that we have put forth funding for the planning to continue, and we know that especially our members from the Baltimore City delegation, this is and Baltimore County for that matter, that we have an interest in this. But whether or not at the caucus will take this up, for next session or a future session, that is something that we have to come together and also to receive additional,
Now,
information about.
there's also community groups such as the Caucus of African American Leaders who
Mm,
have put forth a resolution to rename the Key Bridge, the
mm,
Aaron J. Mitchell Bridge, and the Choptank River Bridge in the Eastern Shore in Cambridge, the Gloria Richardson Bridge.
mm.
Will that type of matter catch on with the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus?
So, that's interesting, right? I think when we were towards the end of session, because the with the travesty of the Key Bridge and the collapse of the Key Bridge, um, that was emergency legislation
Mhm,
to address the needs of the families and those displaced from the port of Baltimore. And so I don't believe that there was sufficient time or there was even a consideration related to renaming of the bridge, because there was still, a lot of things going on during that time. So I think even similar to the last question, that has yet to be decided. I'm not particularly sure if that is something that we would take up. But I think that, and even there was, I believe, and I was very excited to see this bill come forth, but it was even looking at, um, oh my goodness, I'm trying to reflect on it, but all I'm saying is that as it relates to how we are reflecting back and looking at renaming of buildings, removing of statues, and ensuring that we're sending the right message, right? But we're also telling the story and telling our history. I think that is a part it's a good conversation to have,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, because it's so very interesting how the Confederacy fell. So it's so very interesting why there is such a focus, and we know that it's largely driven by systemic racism, right? But
Mhm.
of why there are these spaces and places that are protecting the names of these buildings and bridges and whatever else, right? Whatever infrastructure that we have in our state and across the country, that is kind of holding on to a past that, if anything, they lost, right?
Mhm.
And it
Right,
created
right.
so much hurt, harm, and danger for so many. And
Yes.
it's a constant reminder for those that remain. So I think there's certainly worth having the conversation, but is this something that the Black Caucus would advance? I do not know for certain.
Well, I've got to have you back because, you have really just started, I think, to share with us so much about the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus and how it has impacted our laws in 2024. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Claudia. It's been a pleasure.